Jesus. So let's take a look for just a moment here, Matthew chapter 12. Well, that's Mark. I want Matthew chapter 12. Might have to cut this light up a little bit here so I can see the scripture a little better. Beginning in verse 1. At that time, Jesus went on the Sabbath day through the corn, and the disciples were hungry. And they began to pluck the ears of corn and started to eat. Now, I don't know about eating raw corn. I guess, I know you can do it, obviously. I don't know if that would be, you'd have to be pretty hungry, I think, just to pluck a piece of raw corn and eat it, but they did. And when the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, behold, your disciples do that which is not lawful to do on the Sabbath day. They saw it and they said to him, see there? You see? Your disciples, they're doing stuff they ain't supposed to be doing on Sabbath day. You're supposed to be a rabbi. You're supposed to be a teacher. And, of course, they were always looking for a way to accuse him and a way to find fault with him. They were some of the biggest fault finders you'd ever run into in your life. But he said to them, have you not read what David did when he was a-hungered? And they that were with him, how he entered into the house of God and did eat the showbread, which was not lawful for him to eat, neither for them which were with him, but only for the priest. So, an act of necessity on the Sabbath is lawful. These guys were hungry. They needed to eat. David's guys, they were involved in conflict. They needed strength. They needed sustenance. Jesus' disciples here were hungry. He didn't stop them. He didn't say anything to them about plucking that corn and eating it. And so, but the Pharisees had a problem with that. That broke one of their little man-made rules. And so, Jesus was telling them acts of necessity are lawful. Then, acts of service to God. Look at verse 5. Or have you not read in the law how that on the Sabbath days the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are blameless? He says, haven't you ever read in the law that on the Sabbath that the priests that were busy about temple work and worship, that these priests they violate what you would consider to be work, the sanctity of the Sabbath, by breaking it. But he says, yet they are guiltless or guileless or without fault. They were blameless. Why? Because they were involved in a work of necessity and of service to God. So that was not prohibited. That's why a lot of Christians use Sunday for an excuse. Many of them profess to be Christians, and they use Sunday for an excuse not even come. Those that do come use it for an excuse not to do anything else but. They don't want to get involved, but works of necessity, Jesus said, and we'll see in just a minute, I'm going to go ahead and get ahead of myself anyway. He said, if your ox in the ditch, you got to get him out. We have a lot of ox and ditches situations, even nowadays, especially. People have to work on Sunday because their boss man demands it. And so, therefore, they're under obligation. If they agree to sign on to that job, they're under obligation to work on Sunday. Just a few weeks ago, we didn't have Sunday evening service here, and some of the kids came down, and so Sunday evening we were out in the yard. You see all that stuff that's been cleaned up, and that, like I said, we got a wall on that end now because we cut down and cleaned up all that shrubbery and bushes and trees and stuff that need to come down. We cleaned up all that stuff. It was Sunday afternoon, but the ox in the ditch, because they had to go back. And so while I had them to labor and help with the labor, so then they came down and offered to do it. So you can't look a gift horse in the mouth, as the old saying goes, and the ox is in the ditch. It needed to be done. That's the only time that we brought some equipment to do it with. And so, it was an ox in the ditch moment. Now, if we had been having service that evening, or we had to minister somewhere else, they might could have done it, but I wouldn't have been here to help you know,
They gave us a lawnmower.
yeah, that's right. Gave us a lawnmower out of it. So I guess they intended for me to get to work. So acts of necessity, he says. He says, I say to you that in this place is one greater than the temple. In this place is one greater than the temple. In other words, he's of course referring to himself. And he says, I tell you, someone or something greater, more exalted, more majestic than what this temple is here now. What he was saying, there's a necessity to tend to spiritual things. Not religious things, per se, spiritual things. There's a difference between religiosity and spirituality. And so acts of necessity, should be putting these up here as we go. Acts of necessity,